Hello, welcome to the meeting tent. We're back again to talk about the work of Stan Tenen. Today we have a special guest, Idelle Packer, and we're going to talk to her about another way of expressing the letters. We've talked about hand gestures and expressing your inner self in the outer world through hand gestures. But as we're going to see, it goes beyond just hand gestures. And so let's leave it with that. But before I introduce Idelle, let's introduce our usual cast of characters: Levanah Tenen, Michael Andron, and Daniel Gill. And by the way, Daniel, I don't mean for you to always be last on the list. It just happens. Maybe because you're the youngest. I don't know. But
oh, that's it.
Anyway, we're glad to have all of you. Anyway, so Idelle, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background and then how your relationship with the Hebrew letters, the alphabet, and then we're going to talk about the choreography. So, stage is yours.
Okay, my background is in dance originally, just very passionate about the art form. I studied dance in college at Sarah Lawrence College. I came out of college and just wanted to dance professionally and study the form, ballet, modern dance, jazz, everything that I could work with to have more vocabulary for creating movement and expressive dance in choreography. So that was sort of my start. It's been an interesting journey in life, like all lives. We fall in love, we have family, inconvenient to a very intense career in dance. And there were times when I pulled away from it and was more devoted to family, and other times when I came back in and found venues for choreography or performance in other people's works. And just over the years, I've always identified as a dancer. And then there was a period of time when I was injured from a car accident, and I had to kind of regroup and see my life a little more with a bigger lens. And I decided to go into the Alexander technique, which is a way of looking at the body. And at the time, for healing, it felt like the right way to learn more about how the mind and the body and the spirit are unified in action. So this led me to more interest in physical therapy eventually, and I got a degree in physical therapy and moved out of the New York City area where I had done most of my dancing and moved to Asheville, North Carolina. I'm trying to go quickly through this sort of snapshot of a life. And in Asheville, I discovered contact improvisation, and I felt like I had renewed my identity as a dancer. Like this was a form I could do as I age. And I loved the combination of somatic understanding of sensation and momentum and the physicality of that particular form. And in that form, you're inventing dance as you dance it. It's not planned, it's truly improvisation. And then I was still enjoying making solos and duets when I could, and I started to make a solo in my basement. It's a very small area, 4 steps by 7 steps, basically. So I called the dance 4 by 7, and I made a pattern. It was like a geometric pattern of moving forward, backwards, diagonals, and I kept working it. It was complex, and I kept finding how could I repeat it and remember it. And I got to a certain point where I just wasn't as curious anymore. Like this wasn't holding my interest. And a voice a question popped into my mind, and it said, what is the fourth and seventh letter of the Hebrew alphabet? So this is 2016.
Wow.
I don't know why that question came into my head, but I decided to go look it up. So it shows you how little Hebrew I remembered. I grew up with a Jewish education, but I had become somewhat estranged from observance and Hebrew. And I was like, I don't know, what is the fourth letter and the seventh letter? So I had this book of letters by Kushner, and it's actually a beautiful book, and it happened to be on my shelf probably for 25 years, and I hadn't looked at it. And the fourth letter was Dalet, and that's the beginning of my Hebrew name, Dahlia. So already I was like, oh, there's a connection. What does this author have to say about Dalet? And it was just so many beautiful ideas of doorways that are opening, and I just said, I can dance about this. So I made my first solo with the Hebrew letters concept about Dalet. And I actually had a chance to perform it. I came back and I decided back to my area. I performed it in Virginia. And I don't know, I just came back and I got very excited about it. I want to expand this. I want to know more about the Hebrew letters. And I decided to Google, that's a verb now, Hebrew letters and dance. And what came up was these old films from the 90s of Stan Tenen showing these gestures. And I had already created my dance, right? And I had used kind of the shape of the letter and the numbers, and it was very abstract. There was a little storytelling in it because I used the idea of these four doors to knowledge and understanding. But when I gestured Dalet, which is Dalet, Lamed, Taf, those three letters that spell Dalet, according to what he was showing me, I did Dalet, Lamed, Taf. And I just got goosebumps. I just said, I couldn't choreograph anything more beautiful than that. So I decided to just play with those gestures. What would happen if the Dalet was a breath? What would happen if I turned as I made the Lamed? What would happen if I did a back bend with the fingers landing on my chest? And I just kept expanding the expression of each letter. And I also looked at the meaning of each letter, because, I mean, I'm skipping a big piece of the story, which is that I started to transcribe those gestures into my body by studying them every single night. I got obsessed with the gestures. And I learned them all. I wrote a little chart for myself. So it was like an intellectual, physical, spiritual exercise. And I started envisioning a dance with more dancers and maybe feature certain letters that I found moving, either because I loved the shape, like this nun, the arms crossed, it's so beautiful. Could I make something about nun? The feel of nun, that you close your eyes, that it's an inner spiritual letter. What could I make with that? And so those were the questions, and there's so many questions and so much material. It's a lifetime and more of material. So I decided to call my dance an etude, that it was just one study. And I called it Etude 22 because there's 22 letters. And because the feeling of the whole evening was going to be a feeling of meditation, that it was going to be inner, that the letters are taking you to some inner journey. I called it Etude 22, Meditation on the Alphabet. And the attention span of my dancers was quite amazing. We did 2 pilot studies with 8 dancers, and the pilot study was just a 15-minute dance, and we performed each of those versions. And then I decided to expand it, and there were some dancers that were in on it from the very beginning and stuck with it all the way till performance of a full evening length work in 2019 um, with live music. The music was so beautiful. Elan was the name of the composer. For a second, I was going blank. And he just did a gorgeous job and used instruments that were like an Iraqi violin and harmonium, just unusual instruments that lent itself to a more meditative and it was really quite the dream for me to do a full evening length work. There were 5 featured letters. There were 10 dancers in the end, which is something we can also talk about. I was inspired to make the dance for 10 because of what Stan wrote in his book about a minion. And I wanted to try it. Let's experiment. If I have 10 dancers, would it feel like a community? Would something happen that's bigger than any one of us? And the answer is yes, it did happen. And the group became very close and very supportive of each other, personally, as well as focused. And as you'll see, if you show a clip, the focus is remarkable. And these were community dancers, not professional dancers, mostly dancers from my contact improv community. So they were familiar with certain lifts and movements, but they didn't have any experience with memorizing an actual sequence of movement.
Before I show you the specific portion of Etude 22, it's a short clip, and throughout the piece, the dancers are dancing the letters, but there's one specific place where it's really obvious. But before I show that, I want to read a piece that's at the end of the video. So I'd just like to read this one portion. Thank you to the Meru Foundation and Stan and Levanah Tenen for their research and investigations into the letter patterns in the Torah. When transposing these patterns through the lens of geometry, they discovered a reciprocal spiral model that fit in the human hand. When held in the hand in turn, the spiral hand device revealed the shape of each of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. The resulting gesture and the transitional movements between gesture letters was meaningful, as it would evoke the letters' ancient meanings as described in the 13th century writings of the Zohar. At 222, meditation on the alphabet is an extension of the research of the Meru Foundation, deepening somatic experience of gesturing by expanding the gestures and their meaning into expressive dance. The letter gestures and elegant geometric shapes explored by Stan and Levanah Tenen in their book, The Alphabet That Changed the World, was foundational to the movement research and integrated into the choreography of Etude 22, Meditation on the Alphabet.
Wow, Idelle, can I just say, that's beautiful. It just really touches my heart. You got it. You really got it. And one thing that I personally want to add just about Idelle's translation of the letters into actual dance movement. For any of you who have watched the video or videos of Stan demonstrating the letters, it's really obvious that Stanley was not a dancer. You know, his movements were centered on the hands and the sight line. What Idelle has done is grown that into a full body awareness of the meaning and feeling of each letter, which I find extraordinarily beautiful and moving and clear. That's something that I so appreciate about her translation of the letters into full body dance, is the best way that I can put it. It's so easy and so expressive to actually see both the feeling and the gesture. If you know both. Anyway, I so appreciate what Idelle has done and what she decided for herself to do, in part because it's something that Stan always wanted, was to have someone who could actually get the feeling and dance the letters, which he knew he couldn't do. So Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's without question.
Now, some sections I really just went with, um, like there's always an indication of it, the gestures are in there if you look
Hmm.
for them. But some of them really, like the Olive trio, just, it was really, you do this movement and
Hmm.
you think about nothingness and unity and oneness and the stillness before creation. And to start with that Olive trio, um, and sort of a stirring, like a walking. We used the floor pattern of the reciprocal spiral,
Hmm.
and so the whole walking in the beginning of the Olive trio by the whole cast entering and then moving into Olive was all intentional to
Hmm.
set the tone of the spirals of, and you look at, now we have the Webb telescope, but the Hubble telescope had some extraordinary capture of reciprocal spirals out in the universe, just paralleling all the way down to our hand. What a remarkable, occurrence to see it in the universe and then see it right, that we can also bring it right into our body.
Hmm.
So I've just been taken with the discovery, and I have lots of ideas about what these letters can do, not just in dance, because I've also been teaching
Hmm.
courses that are to non-dancers, and I'm getting more and more ideas. And I listened to what um, Michael had said about healing, and there's so much healing in looking at your own name and gesturing your own name and learning more about who you are through the gestures. So we can talk about some of my experiences, but some of them have been more on the healing realm, and some of them have been more on the dance realm. And it's like a spectrum of possibilities, and certainly enhancing prayer and understanding text. So yeah, we have lots to talk about.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. We definitely want to expand on this because, we've kind of laid a foundation in past episodes, but now we have to expand and show that this is real world stuff. The thing about the Hubble and everything, we've been, trying to demonstrate that this is an intrinsic shape and it's part of our being. And that goes hand in hand with our attempt to get the hand model made and manufactured. And that's a project we're working on. So any comments, any, Daniel, Michael, um, anything you'd like to express on this subject?
I just
I
have a
know
quick,
that.
quick
Go
question.
ahead, Dan.
Yeah, just, it's so amazing. Do you like are you taking a journal by any chance? Are you documenting some of your feelings and some of your experiences? Uh, that's just a question. That's all.
Yeah, it's a good question. No. I mean, yes and no. I have all of the coursework I've taught is documented both on Zoom recordings and in notes. But these thoughts that I've had since I watched some and listened to your conversations, I have not written down other than sending a quick email out to Bill and to all of you. So you could see, just sort of how I'm gesturing and using them with words and bringing out the power of words through the gesture, which is really the work, Daniel, you and I did all the way back when we team taught at the festival.
Yeah, for sure. That was amazing. Yeah, no, it's so interesting. You're talking about healing and gesturing your own name and all those experiences that people have. It might be useful for you and for the group also, and just in general to like go back and try to remember those and just write them down, like almost stream of consciousness, like this happened, this happened, this happened, and then because as you go forward, because I think the work you're doing sounds like it's pretty groundbreaking. So it
Definitely.
yeah, like what seems to you like, oh yeah, this might be healing and this thing happened. It's like,
But
it's
you've been doing it.
yeah, you've been doing it. So I just would encourage you, just try to go back and write that down and then like journal it. And then as you go forward also, because you might, again, like, you might find patterns, 6 months from now, go back and you look at all your journal entries and you go, oh, wait a minute, there's this pattern going on here. Or even that might happen when you write down, just trying to remember or remembering. That's all. I think it's great. It's amazing work. And that's my list.
And I would just tend to add, as somebody who's been struggling with keeping a journal myself, that if actually writing and typing the words is an issue for you, because sometimes it is for me, a lot of the dictation apps now are really good, and you can just talk. And if that's easier for you, and then go back and edit it later. But I find that's easier for me, because when I try to write something down, my editor just jumps right in and says wrong word, right word, and it makes it a really painful task instead of something that says, oh, this is what I was thinking. So I just might suggest that.
Yeah. So I've done, what do you call it? I've recently done a devar that my tour group wanted me to do. And this is just so interesting to me. So I went to the letters of, it was on Balak, the recent, it's very recent. So we just had Parsha Balak, and I was sort of struggling with what's interesting about all of this, and I decided to look at the letters, and I said, how interesting. His name begins with a bet, which is a blessing, and it ends with a kuf. And what is this kuf thing? Because that just kept, and I started looking into the meaning of kuf, and I not only looked at Stan's meanings, but I looked at other stories that I've collected on kuf, and this concept of klipa being sort of the husk that covers holiness, and then kedusha, holiness, that both are contained in the kuf. And here was this king, and he called on a seersayer, or a soothsayer, a seer, somebody who could curse the Israelites. But why didn't he think, I'll hire him to bless my people? Instead, he hired him to curse the Israelites. So he was the part of the kuf that's klipa. He was down below the line. He didn't have any understanding of how to climb up and see, God's arm over his head, that there's a different lens. He was limited. And so I got all this information just from looking at the letters. And I wasn't even gesturing them. I was just like, what insights can I get? When I went to write this thing, my rabbi cautioned me against the letters. She said, it's very intellectual. You're going to lose the group. And sure enough, I dropped the letters. I just told the story. I used some of the concepts, but the piece was so beautiful. But the process was, for me personally, I started with the letters. And, and even the fact that both Balak and Balaam both began with a bet, and neither of them understood really blessing. They were both trying to do the opposite. And then there's this little donkey in the story who really represents a godlike quality, like clear seeing and, serving its master. And this little donkey's name began with an aleph. So I didn't point all that out, but I just went with the message. But for me personally, as a process and research, to see those things just seemed so fantastic.
And in fact,
it's a new lens. It's like a lens that I can look through. It's a gift I have now that the letters are talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is something that certainly was true for Stan, and something that hearing you talk about it, I learned from, obviously, because I'm obviously interested in the letters. But I think that there also is an audience for the kind of direct letter-based insights that you just expressed. As somebody, I just wound up going to 3 days worth of classes with teachers of very mixed ability to reach an audience that it was more mature than they may have been prepared for. And, you know, it would even increase my interest to have the specifics discussion of the letters. So, and I also did just one thing about, you know, the little donkey, something that I hadn't realized until the week that it was the Parshas. The little donkey was feminine.
Was feminine. It was a female donkey.
Yeah, you know, and what's up with that? You know, that's a whole other line of thought.
Well, the women's commentary had a comment about that and said, you know, if you look at Prophets 8, this lady wisdom, this sort of how we can embody that sort of chokhmah as a maybe a feminine quality. But that's, yeah, every little nuance now in Torah has meaning because I can look at the Hebrew letters and I can pull it apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what the mystics did. They pulled it apart and then they put it back together.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I agree.
and that's where their insights came, meditating on just, you know, why is this letter starting? The whole Torah starting with a bet. Why? And
At one time, we had at our house this mystic from Sfat. I don't know why he like showed up at my door. I was like, "Can I give a class here?" He was just like, he was kind of like this. I don't know, maybe he was 60 or 70, and he was wearing all white. And he has a yeshiva in Meron, where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is buried. And his whole class, this is so fascinating. I mean, it was in Hebrew. Someone translated. Maybe his gabbai, his helper, and it was all about the system of the Shefatal, what they call Ik Bachar, which is the system that Stan discovered, independent of knowing about the Shefatal, which is the 3 levels of commentary, and that's precisely what he did. He gave these different perushim on the Torah in this school of understanding these different levels and interchanging those letters within a text, and that opening up different meanings. So you're specifically right. A lot of the Kabbalah and Kabbalistic ideas come from studying the letters and the relationships between the letters. And what's so exciting about what you're doing and in general about the hand model is it brings this absolutely like really esoteric knowledge, which, you know, you have to learn for years, and you've got to master the Talmud, and you've got to it kind of bypasses that in a way and just kind of, well, here it is. Like, here you go. And it's in a way that every single person can actually understand. Like, the problem with going directly to a Kabbalah book, if you're not ready, is because you might misunderstand it because it's intellectual. Whereas this, it's just in your hand. It's movement. And so it's intimate to you right away. So you can't go higher than you're capable of receiving, but you can get the same concepts that you would in the Kabbalah books by doing this work with the hands, by gesturing the letters. It's just, it's amazing.
It is. And I saw you had some models in one of your other, this is one that Stan had given me, the one with the thick wire. But what I did was I took a pipe cleaner and I wrapped the pipe cleaner with masking tape, and I made 10 of them so every dancer could hold it in their hand and see, even though it's very rough and it's not exactly the dimensions and the beauty of the ones that you own, but it was something that I could make so that as we learned the gestures, that I got the idea that the hand remains the same, but the wrist changes, the elbows change, the height, the different variations. And to see so many variations within a hand that's just doing this. And usually where there's limitation, there's creativity. That's what I've learned in dance. You make a score, you limit what you're actually going to do. Like, you are only going to walk on the diagonal line from point A to point B. That's your limitation. And within that, so much creativity can happen. And that's what I found, like in, you know, choreography, we're moving, we're doing all these different things with our hands, but to limit the hands through an entire evening of dance to this shape created so much, it opened so much creativity for movement.
Yeah.
Okay.
One
I,
thing that I noticed, that I told you in an email, but I saw one of your demonstrations, the letters, where the lamed, which Stanley always did, was basically here. You were going up above your head, but the key was the sight line was the same. You were looking up at it.
Yeah.
And that's what's important, is that, if you imagine yourself being able to see the letter in your hand, well, you're looking at your hand. And if it's above your head and you're a dancer and you can go like this, you can still physically look at your hand, as opposed to the vav, which is, behind your back. You have to kind of
Vav is very interesting.
picture it 360.
I remember asking Stan, I said, I'm doing the vav here, not
Mhm.
here.
Mhm.
Because when I'm here, I am aware of my spine. My
Right.
spine is in front of the top of my head. Um, so
Yeah.
when I did this, I didn't put it here. And do you
Mhm.
know what he said? He said, that's fine. We're still working on this stuff. And if you notice spine more strongly here, you
Mhm.
should do it here.
Mhm.
And so that did give me a little bit of opening
Mhm.
to make them really my own. Just each one had to feel as though my whole body was connected to the
Right.
concept and presence
Mhm.
somatically and
Yeah.
balance in the body. It's not just a hand gesture. Your body is attached, your arms are attached to your body. Your body has to be present to do the gestures. And that's what I've been teaching, and it's been very full for the people, working them
Yeah,
because
I think that's marvelous, and Stan thought it was marvelous too. It's something
he
that
said
you
iron.
couldn't do.
Yeah, I remember he said the same thing about iron. He said you could bring iron out here as long as you're looking at it.
Hmm.
So we did. We used that. We used that because he had demonstrated that.
Hmm.
But I didn't realize I was changing lamed. I could lower my arms.
Whatever feels right to you. The idea is that the learning is being reflected into your consciousness. That's kind of what was in the back of his thinking as he saw the lamed in his hand when he was holding the model, basically pretty much like this. So what?
Actually, for the word lamed,
Mhm.
for the letter lamed, that would be probably more of greater meaning, because there are people who learn out of a book,
Mhm.
and there are people who learn out of a telescope,
Mhm.
and it may be the same motion in lamed is limud, is learning.
Exactly.
The
That's what
word
he
the
was
word
thinking.
itself has that meaning, and so no two people learn exactly the same way.
Mhm.
So it's probably more fitting for the lamed to have that differentiation than almost any other letter.
I think
Stan used to always say that when he was talking about hand gestures, that even a blind person is aware of where their hands are. And so, you're putting your inside into space. And if you know the general direction, I think the feeling will eventually, if you know the meaning of the letter, just take over.
yeah, the spiritual depth that Stan brought to his work, that he was always looking for uh, the imagery that reflected back to text. And I mean, here we are in the meeting tent, right? So all of these metaphors had meaning for him. And I think that's what attracted me to this, is that it's not just, learning the ABCs like you do in sign language. Each letter and the transitions are
Yeah.
totally surprising.
Mhm.
So I had just learned in Torah study about the well, the bear, and the boar, the cistern and the well, and I decided to gesture it after the session was over, and if you can see me, the movement from here to here. I mean, let's see, it's bet,
Mhm.
and then oh, it's bet aleph. It's bet aleph resh.
Wow.
right? And then when you repeat it, it's a waterfall. It just goes,
Oh, wow.
it's waterfall. You see the water tumbling inside your body. It's like, wait, that's the living well. And then when you
Wow.
do the bore, which sort of stops here, there's sort of a stillness. It doesn't have the same tumble. It tumbles here, but it doesn't tumble again and then again the way the movement of bear, if I'm pronouncing the Hebrew words correctly. You have to help me, Daniel. Right? Bear and bore. But that's part of the excitement of teaching the power of words. We did, um, let's see, exile and freedom. What is it? It's galut and what's the second
Geula.
word, Daniel? What?
Geula.
And geulah. And the difference is the
Yeah.
olive. There's an olive. So that's extraordinary enough that the difference between exile and freedom is an olive, right? Bring some spirituality in. But when you actually gesture it, the galut gets all caught up. You feel all narrow. And when you add the olive, it opens the whole thing up. It's big.
Yeah.
So,
Act-
so
The
each
the
time I would just surprise myself with the transitions and the feeling of saying a whole word in gesture. And then we explored that in our course, and it was very exciting because I think the
the
power of Hebrew is so extraordinary. And if you add the gestures, it's just full of surprises.
You know, back in the Old West, there was a word called galoot, and it describes some big guy, you know, oh, this guy's a big galoot. You find it everywhere. Let me go ahead and play the section from Etude 22. Let's take a look.
And that's where you can stop it, actually.
Yeah, so I mean, it was just so great to see this when we first saw it. I don't know if you know, I'm sure Levanah had the same, and Stan had the same reaction. But I mean, first of all, it was, as a videographer, was really well produced. And it just, you know, it was just amazingly shot and amazingly choreographed. Let's see here. Now, are you signing a specific phrase here?
Okay, so we're getting our brush and we're dipping it in some kind of blood or paint and we're marking our door.
Oh, wow.
So that's where that whole gesture came from and why each person did that individually in their own way. And then after marking the door, they're looking at it and they do this 4 gestures, which I'm not going to
Okay,
do.
gang. What are those letters?
It's the name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Vav, hey.
Yes, it's Hashem. Yod He Vav He. Mhm.
Very
So
cool.
if you go back, you could see it maybe, the
Yeah.
Yod. So as their hands drop and they take in what that act meant to mark their door,
So you see, yeah, that's really something. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I'm just always amazed at the focus of the dancers, given the material and given their background, and like they really stepped up and
How long did that take
they were
how long did that take to put that together?
well, it was a 60-minute piece with
Yeah.
many sections. So yeah, it was a
I'm
process of
just amazed at
2016
the
to
process.
2019.
Yeah, I'm just amazed at the process, you know, of first of all planning it out. And so is that kind of a reciprocal process where you're planning it out with the dancers, or do you already have it in your head before you even have the dancers around?
Well, there were different sections, and the order of the piece didn't come together till very close to the performance, where I suddenly saw that it actually was telling a story. Because I had picked 5 random letters, to be honest. And they were letters that had meaning to me, but I didn't know how it was going to fit into the whole. So Dalit became the sort of prologue of saying, let's open some doors. Let's learn together. Let's see what this etude is all about. And then we started with Aleph, which was really nothingness, right? No thingness. The silence of Aleph. Perhaps this is a little creation story. And then from Aleph, I believe then that Yud came in. It was like this little point, like out of nothingness came one point that, every letter is made with a Yud. Start with a Yud. If you draw the line down, it becomes a Vav. You take that line in another direction and it becomes a Kaf. So that idea of creation, starting with Yud. And so there's a whole Yud section of coming into form, vibration, and we used many, many images. And you'll see the little Yud character, coming right into this, doing different things and coming back to the Yud. And then from Yud came all the letters. So then there's a solo who goes through all the letters and does a little bit from each letter. And then from that, I think we went into Nun, which was sort of this quiet place of, I'm probably forgetting the order exactly, but yeah, and the Nun was a solo against a duet. And we used even the final Nun at the end. The fellow had his arms straight up, and there were times when they just closed their eyes, which I loved because Kushner said, you see Nun with your eyes closed. And I loved that image. Soul, inwardness.
Next,
So, yeah, and then the Chet duet came out of just a relationship with a dancer that I've danced with for years. And I said to him, there's a story here. When we dance, something is happening. And he was like, what? What are you talking about? Because we improvise. We're contact dancers. And then I read about the Chet. Chet leans, the Zion and the Vav are leaning against each other, a masculine and a feminine word. And they don't really want to lean, but they need to form this letter. And so this whole more abstract relationship of Chet, and what is that in a relationship? What happens when people need each other, but they really don't want to be with each other, but they do need to be with each other? And where are the conflicts, and where is the softening into acceptance of needing each other? So that duet, which comes at the end, we called it the Chet duet, at least that was its nickname. We used the letter, the Chet letter, we used the gesture, but it was very abstract, and we got to use all of the ways that we relate to each other in dance. And that was the story. That was the story we were always dancing, but we said it. So it was an actual
amazing.
set.
It's
And
just
then the group, had many group sections where the letters were just having fun, like alphabet soup or an alphabet game that children play. And we did go through, the whole group had to learn all of the letters, all of the gestures. Dancers are amazing. They have really good kinesthetic memories. It's not
that's
easy
one
to
of the
learn
things.
22 letters and then dance them.
The idea, the fact that they could remember all these moves. I mean, like you said, this was an hour performance.
Yeah, it was
Blown
long.
away by, the ability to, even a Broadway show, the dancers are out there for 10 minutes, but,
Yeah, we
it
have
was
pretty
incredible.
much. Yeah, except when each solo or duet would be happening or the trio, then the others would be circled around and kind of making a frame for them.
Right.
We moved it into the round, which Levanah was very astute about that. She said, now you have community. The whole community is supporting what you're doing by changing it from a proscenium stage to a round. And once we did that in the second pilot, we kept the round. So yeah, so thank you for letting me talk about this
Oh, God,
experience.
we could
It's so
talk about this. You know, I'm curious what you and Daniel, what were you guys yakking about? I mean, was it related to this at all, or just in general, music in general?
It was a Lamud festival, and we were just kind of thrown together. And wow, was that a great collaboration? It was a text about the hand that's in your morning prayer,
Yeah.
Daniel, that you chose.
Yeah, we did. We the previous year or a year before, I presented on behalf of Stan and Levanah at Limud, and then the following year, Idelle and I presented together, and we chose the part of the morning prayer in the section that is verses of song, Suke de Zimra. The prayer is known as Ashrae, but really it starts with Tehillah David, and it goes through the Aleph Beit. And there's a very interesting thing that the part where it says Poteach et yadecha umasbi'ah l'chol chai ratzon, open your hands and give satisfaction or give sustenance to all of life's will or something like that. Very kind of strange pasuk, but it's seen as like absolutely the most essential part of the prayer service. Like, you know, there's a lot of siddur. It says like basically says if you've been sleeping till now, say this one with like awareness.
In Art Scroll Siddur, it specifically tells you to open your hand when you say that line.
Yeah. So what's interesting is when you poteach et yadecha, and even the what they call the Rosh Tevot, the first letter of each word, so Pei, Aleph, and Yud, is considered a name of God, and you're supposed to really focus on those three letters when you say that. Umasbia l'chol chai ratzon, right? The meaning of the second part of the verse is the meaning of the letters. Poteach et yadecha, right? Umasbia, poteach is the peh, the mouth. Umasbia, we get satisfaction, right? L'chol chai, right? The aleph, the chol chai, the aleph shel olam, the aleph, right? Yud ratzon, right? Like the will, right? Your hand. So the Rosh Tevot are directly mimicked, meaning it's explicating the letters in the exact way that Stan actually discovered or rediscovered. It's essential. And so it just like blew my mind because it's so normative. As a matter of fact, the Sfaradim, when they bench, they make hand gestures at that place. They poteach et yadecha umasbia, something like this. They move their hands, and it's an old tradition amongst Sfaradim to make a hand gesture when you say that pasuk, when you say that verse. So it's a deep connection. And so anyway, we did this program, and it was lovely and tremendously satisfying. And
let me just insert. Daniel is referring to a prayer called the Ashrae. It's in the daily prayer. It shows up in almost every morning, afternoon, evening. It's supposedly very, very old, going back to temple times. Each line begins with the letter of the alphabet. And so when it comes to, was it the pay?
The pay.
Pay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what he was referring to. So.
And what's amazing is that, you know, in one of the Tehillim, one of the Psalms that, you know, there are several that go through the Aleph Beit. In this one, the middle verse, which is considered the most important, actually shows you how each letter has a different meaning. And so it's again, again, these are like little clues, not so little really, that this is really uncovering the system that's actually much older.
Yeah. And so that's what we do. We look for clues, you know, in all our Jewish liturgy and prayers. And when you're aware of this stuff, you start seeing things that other people don't see. And that's a perfect example of how that works. Michael, yeah.
Yeah, this is what you're describing, for those who are listening now, is a very deep idea of Kabbalistic prayer. That dance is a prayer. That explication, instead of just mumbling through prayers and not paying attention to what you're saying, but just to get through with it, is to many not even prayer at all. It's just the words. It's like a puppet without the hand inside the puppet to make it come alive. The very idea of prayer, as you're going through a whole bunch of morning prayers, to simply, like you're doing the I Ching, just stop at a singular word. And if you're working with a translinear Sidur, which Art Scroll also makes, so even if you don't really know a lot of Hebrew, it tells you what that word is. And then search for the sparks. That's why I say it's a Kabbalistic prayer. The idea that there are sparks in everything, whether it's a Jewish thing or whether it's a secular thing. To search for a spark of divinity, that God exploded in creating the world, and there were sparks hidden everywhere. And the Kabbalists and the early Hasidim were very much in the business of searching for those sparks. So to take a word and search within the word because of the shapes, the numbers, the sound, the meaning, whatever, and any good book on the alphabet, The Wisdom of the Hebrew Alphabet by Monk, or the one that you mentioned by Kushner, or a whole bunch of them, depending on how esoteric you want to get, means that every time you pray, if you come away from one word that you said that you didn't pay attention to before, but now you do, that's real prayer. That's real connection. That's rescuing and elevating those sparks and freeing them to a world that will then be filled with light. I wish I had seen, did you tape the one where the two of you, as I was listening to you, I said, gee, I've watched what Dan did with all the music. You guys have to do this together. And then you said you did. And can you see that? Do you have that on tape?
I'm sorry, which thing that are you asking me?
The one where you worked together with Dan's music and explicating a sentence, or was that just the two of you doing that?
Oh, this was a course, and it was within the context of a Limud festival, and there might have been 10 or 12 people that signed up and participated, and simultaneously there's many courses going on, and
Right.
so it's random who comes into your room, who was attracted to whatever was in the title. And some were dancer people, some were non-dancer people. I think we took them through the whole alphabet. We talked about the prayer.
Fabulous.
We did a meditation in a circle doing the alphabet. It's interesting, when I taught the dancers the gestures, we would stand in a circle. It was the easiest way to learn them. And we would just all mirror each other, and we'd go through the whole alphabet. And
you've also just echoed the first word of the Torah. As he points out in the book, that Breshit, there are many, many ways of breaking down those first words, but bara shayit, to create a fence, to create a circle. When you said we were all standing and we got the audience in the round, okay, you corralled them into that shape, and then you did the same with the dancers, a circle within a circle. And you said, okay, let's look at those letters with this intention in mind, and you introduced them to a whole new level of meaning. Beautiful.
Yeah, but then what happened was, it was so beautiful seeing everybody move in a circle that we ended up creating a circle dance. It came out of
the horror
letters.
And thus the horror was invented.
No, it's there's a famous, actually it's a Talmudic source. It says Atid HaKadosh Baruch Hu lasot machol latzadiki. In the future, after the world is fixed and the whatever, everything's good, or whatever, the Messianic age has come and gone and the world is pristine, or whatever it is, it says God will make a circle dance with the righteous, and he'll be at the head of the circle. Which is so very good. There is no
Nice.
head of the circle,
There's
meaning
no
meaning all humanity will kind of have been raised up to be in the circle of God, right? So we'll be together, but when we're together, so then we're with God. Very beautiful, really ancient teaching, actually.
That's beautiful.
But what I think we found is that it's like intuitive, like I remember, seeing sometimes different lectures of great rabbis, and everyone would be kind of like sitting back, and the rabbi saying, hey, wait, why don't you come closer, like let's sit in a circle, let's get together, so anyway, it's a great memory. That was really nice. It was
Idelle,
actually hot. We didn't tape it.
Idelle, do you think you'll be able to join us again good? Okay, because we want to continue this. We've gone over an hour or so. It felt like 5 minutes, as always, but you've added a dimension to this that definitely we needed. I have a question for you, though. At the beginning, you said you heard 2 letters, the Dalet, and what was the other letter you heard?
The 7th
Zion.
letter is Zion, and I just asked, what is the 4th and 7th letter? And it was interesting, the Dalet, when I read about it, just kind of grabbed me, and then I sort of went with that. But I started to choreograph a dance called 7 to honor that other letter that talked to me. And then when the pandemic started and the building was closed, we just stopped. And so that choreography is hanging. I've never picked up the pieces of stopping. We were going to do another concert with a shortened version of Etude, just picking a few excerpts, and then an expanded new piece called 7.
It's great. Yeah.
It didn't materialize. Maybe that muse is gone now. Maybe it will come back at some point. But that is something that intrigues me. There's a lot about 7. It's such a holy number, a 7th day of rest, the Shabbat. But there's many, many 7s in Torah, and lots to explore. It's very rich.
As there are with every letter in the alphabet.
I'm super interested in them.
We could do a program. We could do a program on each of the letters and fill an hour easily. But for today, thank you, Idelle, for being with us, and all of you guys. And we'll see you next time. Take care.